Hello. Hello. It's a bit warm, so I'm drinking pop. This week, look, all sorts of stuff's gone on. Pretty emotional stuff with, people being stabbed and run over in Nottingham, University City. It's been a pretty emotional thing to watch on the news. And a lot of commentators on the news have been talking about the lack of information from the police and how they're withholding things and attending conferences, reading out a script and then walking off, leaving no room for questions and this and that. And it's led us to wonder about how all of that's on purpose and how maybe are there times when we need to not be told, times we need to be lied to protect us, or only given tidbits and whatnot. And what with all the social media speculation that goes on with these events, people with their camera phones and their TikTok accounts crawling through people's gardens and speculating on how these things happened and who these people were and all this misinformation that's out there. Maybe this is why the police are being very careful with what they put out and when they put it out. So we're going to talk about lies, deception, and information this week. So, Mark, I'm liking some of the photos. I'm liking some good ones. Some good ones to put out over the coming weeks. Some pretty good ones.
Yeah. I tend to do the same trips. Obviously, we're seeing that my mother's putting a few on as well. But now I'm starting to move into the dynamics of photo opportunities that could create some thought-provoking quotes that you're really good at doing. So, like the steps I did at the Stones and the cockerel I pictured
brilliant.
Yesterday. Which
there's a cock joke in there. Absolutely.
We've got to be careful, obviously, for sensitivity reasons. But there could be something about getting up early in the morning and
Yeah, I've tried to tie them all into the picture that you've taken. If there's a mountain in it, if there's some rocks in it, if there's water in it, and all of this, I've tried to make it a combined thing. And you wouldn't believe the engagement and the reach that it's had. That of all the posts that we're putting out, the only other thing that comes close are the caption competitions. I put an episode out and post about the episode. Honestly, it goes next to nowhere. I think people already know it's there because it pops up on their phone to tell them that there's a new episode out. So it's almost like posting it on Facebook has become superfluous, right? Because they know when the episode's out because they've already watched it by the time the post goes out at 7 o'clock, which is the ideal time to post for our type of page on Facebook. So this is why I don't post it earlier. But those posts, the number of shares they get, likes and comments, and your mum's stuff as well, that's doing really well. And she's taking some canny photos, to be fair, like. So I've just been I've been belting those out.
She's away for a month. I'm back up to
a month.
I'm back up to the lakes tomorrow, so see what I can capture tomorrow.
It does show you how pretty some of the stuff is around this country, right? It's not just all cities and buildings and whatnot. There's a shed load of green out there, and we've got our own mountains, we've got our own lakes and this and that, and it's a there's some pretty places.
I had a busload of mature students yesterday, American mature students, took them to the sort of North Wales and the Ogwen Valley, Snowdonia Mountains, and they went all over the place, and they were doing comparisons with ranges in their own states, and it was pretty inspiring. And I think it's one of the things I said I took out of the pandemic and been lucky enough to get out and about recently, that we got to remember we've got a fantastic, beautiful country in our own doorstep.
Yeah, north and west. I mean, Wales is it's a place I've got to visit. It's prettier than I knew it was. And some of the places you've been up the coast towards Scotland is, it's blown me away a little bit. That and perhaps I've been a little disappointed in myself as well. That as much as I love driving and just having a random drive somewhere, I've never driven off to just some of these places on a whim. and so much of it is in the north as well, and it's not like it's a billion miles away. It's doable in a day, isn't it? So yeah, that's something I need to think about more. So these photos are serving many purposes.
Yeah, yeah, and anything that gets us a little bit of exposure and gets traffic moving towards us, it's not a negative; it's only a positive. So
yeah, and then it's creating a bit of enjoyment. I like that people like these things. I like doing the quotes. It's a bit of a challenge coming up with something and either putting it in my own words, which I do sometimes. I'll pick out a quote and go, that sounds rubbish written like that, but I like the sentiment, and I'll write something in my own words, or I'll look at the picture and think of my own. So it's been a nice challenge to do it, and there's been some really good response to them, and I mean every single one of them. I'm not just putting them out there just to put a nice quote out. I mean, when I've put them out, I've meant what I said. I haven't put out something cheesy just to put out something cheesy. I've put every single one of those. I've kind of meant what it said.
Anybody who knows you, Simon, I've worked with you a long time, knows that you don't just Google a phrase about water and put the first thing that comes on, which is what I do.
Ooh, that's nice.
Yeah, what was the one I heard this morning? Could I have some diet water, please? That was a hotel request.
Diet water.
That's an actual hotel request. Could I have some diet water, please?
Oh my God. Right.
Hello.
Right. What? Yeah. What's the world coming to? You
Yeah.
You gave. Well, we had a bit chat before we started, and that example you gave me of how we danced together mentally was brilliant, and the sort of extension, the little chat we had about what we're going to talk about this week, when you said, look, are there moments where we need to be lied to? And I thought, ooh, that's even better than what I said. That's a good way to phrase it. It really is, because there are times when we need to omit things. So we're not lying, but we're not telling you, right?
Yeah.
There are times when that needs to happen.
There's the light bits, which let's just take Anita, and it's not very often that we go out, and when Anita's going out, she puts a lot of effort and thought into how she looks, and when somebody comes downstairs, and it's not very, she if she watches this, I'm not sure how many of them she watches, but she comes down, and if she says, "How do I look?" Okay, and then there's that quandary, isn't it? And do you go left or do you go right? You say, you pick something out and you just say, your handbag looks really, really fantastic. It goes with the outfit. Or, how often would you say it looks ridiculous and get back upstairs and get changed?
Yeah, especially if it genuinely looked ridiculous and you didn't want them to go out. Because later on, why didn't you tell us I look ridiculous? I've had all these comments. So, it's a minefield, that. It's a minefield.
Now, you flip that, and I don't think I would ever say that to Anita. It doesn't matter what I thought in my head. You flip that to Anita, and it's not being unusual for Anita to say, "No, doesn't work."
Yeah. I sometimes wonder, is that a male-female dynamic, or is it is it a married couple dynamic, that you have one in the couple that gives it out, and another one that's quite happy to take that sort of constructive criticism.
And you get into the realms of, am I lying because I do or don't say anything, or is she too honest? And there's that bit about the Ricky Gervais honest level, we like Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson talks constantly about telling the truth all the time, and I'm just like, you can't. I don't believe I could do that.
No, because like you said, is there a good reason to not tell the truth? And I believe sometimes there is. although you look on dating profiles, right? As I've been through millions of them, and there's always those, right? And you know who they are, that say I'm a bit sarcastic, and people are just going to have to learn how to take us. I'm like, oh, you're one of them. You're one of them that voices all their opinions and says, well, I'm just a bit sarcastic. No, you're not sarcastic. You're hurtful. There's a difference between knowing how to be sarcastically funny and a bit dry and being unfiltered. There is a difference, and I find to justify your behaviour is I'm a bit sarcastic, and if you can't handle me, then swipe left. I'm like, well, I will, I will, because you really need to understand why so many people have objected to your behaviour, rather than say, well, I'm me. That's it. Well, there's a certain, even I know there's certain things with my autistic gubbins. Even I understand there's stuff I cannot say, shouldn't say, should find the right moment to say, should rephrase, because everyone's got to get on at the end of the day, right? So
when we put, if we're talking now, and I say something a little bit controversial, in your mind, your filters are working to decide: do I go aggressive or do I go passive? And anybody who says the mind is not working to decide which angle to go at is probably not telling the truth. So you know when the cogs are turning, when you're thinking about something. Now I've got a couple of ways I could react to this one, and we were working through a couple of situations before this where if what I say right now I'm confrontational, then we're highly likely to be going down the direction of an argument. Yeah, which probably will serve no purpose, and I'll be late for the next episode because I think you're a creep, and or I say something non-confrontational which says, yeah, it's me actually, I'm the one, yeah, I'll take the responsibility of that, and it de-escalates. So it's gone, and I'm very much on the de-escalation model of me, very much on that.
Yeah, I sometimes find that if you follow that path, some people realise what's just happened and will freely admit, that they've made a mistake because you haven't bitten and you've taken the better road. So I do try. What's the most productive way to deal with this? What information? I know they've just asked me to comment on all of this stuff and what they look and what they've just done. I'm like, yeah, but I could just blurt out exactly what's in my head right now. Or how do I pick out a thing that leads them perhaps to noticing this for themselves, or at least doesn't head us down like you say, an unproductive argument that sets us up badly for the rest of the day. Then everything's going to be dead quiet. We're not going to talk about this and that, which means this other thing might not get done because we're not going to talk about it. And then I might never get asked that question ever again, or it's formed an opinion.
I don't know about you, Simon, but I do feel like in myself that taking the passive or non-aggressive route constantly sometimes moves me into a direction where I have a bit of a blowout, and it just I just go, and it can be quite hurtful, but I don't know whether that's because I've not been able to release that, frustration.
Well, I have had times when I've felt like, why has the burden always been on me to take the high road? And eventually you reach an end of a fuse you didn't know was there, and you go, right, why hasn't all of the times that I've done the nice thing had an impact on this person? They've just think, oh well, that means I'm okay to continue behaving like that. So it's sort of a way up between, do I nudge them and say that's a little bit unacceptable and you need to change a bit, or do I constantly act as the one that's just going to take what that person's just said? I mean, I know I wouldn't expect that of me, even though I blurt stuff out unintentionally, I try and self-correct, and I'll go home. Oh my god! I said, I'll notice later on, and I'll self-correct, and that won't happen again. Certainly not in the same way, right? But you're right. There comes a point where if you're the one that's always doing that coping, eventually your brain turns to you and goes, "The hell are you doing? Why is it always you? Why is it always you? Why do they get away with that? They always get away with being like that." I was being sarcastic. You weren't. You were just being nasty, a little bit too free with your words. And this is a civilized,
We talk a little bit about NLP. NLP, and we'll say it is my choice to receive the information and either dismiss it or to reframe it and put it into a positive. But I think that's a very, very difficult skill to do. When somebody has been quite blatantly rude and obnoxious to you, to not take that personally is really, really tough skill to actually flip that and say, I don't really care what you said,
Yeah,
jog on, mate.
You might instead try to think of their motivation behind it, and perhaps they're hurting for something. Could be. You don't know.
Yeah. What's driving them to say that in that way? What's going on in their life? So you're moving it back to them and say, what's going on in their life that they would say it that way? And you might just turn around and say, are you okay? Because you've been a bit off with me today.
Yeah, that could diffuse it. I've tried that once or twice. You're right. Yeah. So, is that a lie though? So are you in effect, by not correcting them, are you sort of lying that it's okay to be that way? And you're lying about how you've internally reacted to it. You're not given any signals that set you off.
Well, I just think when it was your birthday last week, and I'm 55. I just think I know that when somebody says something that way, and if I tell a little lie to say I'm okay about it, it's de-escalated and it's gone, and we're not going down a track that it could be really ugly and horrible. So the fact that I'm telling a lie there, I'm saying that's okay.
So these are the so-called white lies, as it were.
Yeah, whatever we call. Yeah, I love the white lies. The little ones that we talk a lot about. So I was doing a bit of a competition with some of the people that I was with yesterday, and you had to name a famous person, and somebody shouted out. I was looking. The name I was looking for was him out of Silence of the Lambs. What's he called?
I can remember all names until you ask me what the name is, and for some reason I always forget.
Anthony Hopkins.
Hopkins, that's the fella. Legend that he is.
So I'm looking for Anthony Hopkins, and somebody shouts out a name, like let's say Sean Connery, yeah, and I could say he's Scottish, and you're nowhere near, but what I'd say was you're in the ballpark, and I just covered everything. You're in the ballpark.
Of course, if you think about it.
But I didn't say how big the ballpark was.
Yeah, exactly. Because in reality, you're miles away. But you wanted to encourage.
You're miles away.
But you wanted to encourage them to continue to participate, though, didn't you? You didn't want to discourage.
Yeah, and we know what the Americans are like, Simon, don't we? The Americans like to think they're pretty close to the answer. They like being right. So you rather than diss them straight away, you say you're in the ballpark, you're getting closer. Give me another one. Yeah. Oh, we're moving.
It's all about enthusiasm, isn't it? In America for many things.
Yeah, and they love it. There was one girl in particular. I think she had some challenges, and she kept shouting out and putting her hand up all the time. I mean, bear in mind that they're sort of 2022. Don't know why she kept putting her hand up, but she. Bless her, she kept shouting out answers, and sometimes she got them right. But you were just like, the enthusiasm of just shouting out answers, but not to kill that enthusiasm by saying you're wrong and you're miles off and do better. It's just you keep that. The other thing you're just talking about sort of lies there, and these are lies we're telling to other people. But then I also started talking about how often we tell lies to ourselves, and I know I do it constantly, tell myself lies, You know,
It can get quite
so
convincing.
yeah, and then you could sort of. I remember when I put eating, drinking, and smoking. So you lie to self and others. Um, so I lied to myself quite a bit about drinking, and then, So if you mention you're supposed to be on a diet, and you decide you're having a big piece of cake and you're overweight, are you lying to yourself?
Well, I've been good today, though. I've been good today. So,
Yeah.
I've earned this bit of cake.
And the fact that I've been good today and the cake is 500 calories, and you just burned every bridge you've created.
Yeah, because you've already had your calorie count for the day. Oh, I've been good today, though. Oh, I see. You're just gonna right.
Yeah, and the fact that you like a biscuit, I like a biscuit, and I find it very difficult not to eat the whole packet. But our intention is to have one, and we have 1 dozen. So are we lying to ourselves?
Yeah, I did that. I did that with a pack of cheddars. They were on special. Two for the price. It was some daft price. So I thought, oh, rather than buy the one, I bought the 2. And rather than leave them in the kitchen, I left them in the living room. And before I knew it, I'd gone through about 10 of them. I hate the word Moorish. I hate it. It's not a word. But I just kept smashing them in, and before I knew it, I was like, that packet was nearly full. I'm near halfway now. Damn it! Damn it! I only had a couple. I'll have a couple. I'll bring them in. It'll save us doing. I'll just leave them there. It'll be like a snack. That'll stop me from eating another sandwich. If I just have a couple of biscuits, just to top us off, that'll stop us from going and making something big. Then I won't make it like a.
How old are we, Simon?
Aye.
How old are we? And how much experience have we got with these biscuits?
Oh, and how much have we talked about how diets don't work and how... Yeah, look at the other 20-odd episodes we've just been through where we've spoken all about this. And where am I? Sitting in the living room with a pack of cheddars. Saying, it's fine. Look, I'll have a couple. Having a couple of biscuits better than going and making a sandwich. I've had half the packet.
He has a little challenge to us and people that the increased number of people that watch us. Have a little scorecard. Pick a particular day, and have a scorecard, and tick off every time you lie to yourself. You'd be astounded.
Oh,
And I'll give you a little example. So I've got a client who was doing the Johari window recently, and they were getting all the 360 feedback from their colleagues. And this individual wrote to me and said, I've completed the Johari window. I think it's wrong. Can you check it? I'm sorry. I opened it up. Nothing wrong with it. Perfectly presented. Very good piece of work. I wrote back to her and said, 1, it's correct. And 2, why are you apologising? And 3, for a test today, could you see how many times you diss yourself and how many times you say sorry without, and let me know how you get on?
Oof, that's going to be enlightening.
A really, really highly intelligent individual just doesn't believe they're good enough.
Isn't it always?
So keep saying sorry for no reason.
Isn't it always? People intelligent enough to be aware of what's going on around them. The imposter syndrome creeps in.
Yeah,
that little extra voice.
Exactly. But you go back to sort of the lying situation, and maybe it's not a big number, or maybe at the end of the day, if we did the test and just how many times did we lie to ourselves, I'm going to go in the gym this morning, and then we didn't get up and go in the gym. Okay, 1 lie. Going to have 50 grams of porridge with some milk in, and we end up throwing a Kit Kat on top of it. This is just another lie, and but having a conversation with somebody and saying, I've just been so busy recently, I've not had a chance to ring you and see how you are. Lie. We all get the same amount of time every day. We still sit and watch Coronation Street and EastEnders on a night time when we could be messaging them and saying, how are you? Missed you, I'm as guilty as everybody. These lies during the day stack up.
But we don't see them. We don't see it
No.
as a lie, do we? We see it as a... There seems to be this weird difference in our own head between a lie and a justification. Like, justifications aren't lies. It's, oh, well, it's because, oh, I was busy, I had this... I had to do... No, every single one of those things was a choice. All of them.
Well,
there was no
I
have to.
I love the fact that...
It's all...
Yeah, I love the fact that you use the word justification. What's the stronger word? It's an excuse.
Ah, yeah. We don't like that word.
No?
We don't like that word at all.
That's an excuse.
No,
it's not.
It's a reason. It isn't. There's a difference. It's a big difference between a reason and an excuse.
Oh, yes. How big is the difference?
Massive. One is
Huge.
One is actually justified and the other one isn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Where does the left-hand side of politics live in the right-hand side? Oh, it's massive. Oh, it's big. Any subject you got in your head, you then get into your own perspective. So there is no distance between the subjects. It's just how you feel about it.
So with what's been in the news, right? And some of these, one commentator expressed disappointment right after this news conference they'd been on.
Yeah.
The chief of police stood up, read a script, and walked off. No room for questions, nothing. And I was chatting to Anne about this last night after we went to this talking. So on the way back, I was saying, look, they were really disappointed that they didn't get a chance to ask any questions. And I thought, well, to me it seemed perfectly normal and justified. I thought, I initially went, ooh, that's harsh, it's unusual. But then my very next thought was, there was a point to that. There was a point to that, because if you think about the kind of questions that get asked, it's asking about stuff she's already answered, technically, because these things try and cover as many bases as possible. And if she can't say, they don't say. Or they'll tell you, we're still investigating X, and we don't want to put information out prematurely. You can totally understand it. But journalists, they'll end up asking questions about stuff she's already said, but they're trying to trip them up into saying more, which is what a journalist won't admit. Say, well, we should have had an opportunity to ask. Yeah, but you'll ask something she's already answered in the hopes that she goes a little bit further or a little bit too far, offers up a little bit more than she intended, especially once she's off script. Or you'll ask a question deliberately that you know she cannot answer, but you will ask it anyway, because this is what journalists generally do. I think there's always something a little bit, as much as, well, we're trying to get to the truth, yeah, but I think some of your means are a little bit nefarious, right? And you need to admit that they are. I think
trying to get to the. I was going to say, are you trying, as the press, are you trying to get to the truth, or are you trying to sell more newspapers?
Yeah, I think if they're honest, there is always that balance between, well, we really do need to know what's going on. The public need to know. So, well, some of the public are willing to wait until they have the full picture. Yeah, but what's going to go on tomorrow's front page? There is always that question. There is always a boss or a leader somewhere in that news organisation, an editor, saying, "Oh, what have you come back with?" Well, now, right, well, then you didn't try hard enough. You need to make them slip up. You need to make them do this. You need to ask that question, whatnot. But I think the police were justified in the approach that they've taken, given the way social media's gone. Utterly bonkers.
You take that. Yeah, you take that as an example. I read a little bit about it this morning because I knew we were discussing about. So it's unusual actually that this guy's still alive, isn't he? So you could put out a statement because he's dead, so you can make some assumptions because he can't come back. But if that came out in court at his trial, you've made yourself look a bit of an arse, haven't you?
Yeah, so there are some things that would spoil your case if you said them ahead of time. Yeah. And the irony is that the number of times one of the presenters has said something like a caller's rang in and said, well, I happen to know the guy, and there was this, and they've stopped them and went, we can't make those sorts of comments on an ongoing case. So, well, yet you feel it's okay to ask some of these questions on the day at the news conference about some of these details, knowing that may trip them up. And you also have to take into consideration that even if they are treating this as a terror type or terror related incident, the reason the guy did it was to instill terror, for example, right? You have to be very sensitive about what you put out, because you want people to be able to carry on. You don't want to make people feel that they can't leave the house. And yes, it is safe. There was only one guy. We believe we've got the right guy. There isn't any more. He wasn't in cahoots with anyone. Everything's back to normal. And then say, oh well, where's he from? And is he an immigrant? I say, well, can you imagine? The Sun yesterday released his name.
Did they?
Yep. Last night I was watching the news late last night when I watched a bit of Jeremy Kyle live, and during his show, breaking news. And of course they're partnered with the Sun, the Times, because it's part of the larger news group. And so the Sun have decided to release the name, and he read it out. And I was like, oh, it wasn't Jeremy Kyle, it was Ian what's his face? Ian Collins. I was like, do I feel any more informed, like, about how it happened, what happened? It was a hard to pronounce name. Is that relevant? Like, do I feel any better knowing the guy's name and that he was granted leave to remain? He's been here X number of years, or is right? Okay, it's an interesting facet of who he is, but does that drive what went on? And then of course later on, they had a guy come on because there was some CCTV footage released, believed to be the same person. He was dressed the same. Blah blah. Happened the same day. Where he put down his backpack in front of this open window of this care home, saw that the window was one of those ones that sort of swings out, it doesn't lock in place, and he basically pulled the window open and started to try and climb through. And this guy had just woken up, as it was his room, and he had breathing issues and whatnot. I mean, to be fair, I looked at him and I don't think I'd mess with him. He just got up, climbed on top of the radiator cover, he says, and just punched the guy in the face. And you could see on the CCTV camera his arms just coming out and smacking him in the head. At which point the guy climbed down and he just slammed the window shut. And he walked off. But apparently he came back and tried to break this double glazed window. And it's all toughened glass and whatnot. And he eventually gave up and walked off. So he's clearly had some sort of agenda, but the police are going to have to be very careful about what they release, because people will then make assumptions about what drove him. Mental health issues, or he's not a British national, or his skin colour, his religion. One of the first things they released was, he's a Christian, and he was shouting stuff about Jesus during the attack, and then you have all these Christians ringing in saying he's not a Christian, he's not this and that. I said, well, look, you could, on one hand, you could make the argument of the Crusades, where you were around stabbing people in the name of religion at one point. And on the other, you could say, well, he could just be saying that in order to tarnish the religion. Or he could have a genuine mental breakdown and think he's some sort of God, doing God's work. You don't know. So it kind of goes to prove, especially when you see all of the stuff that's gone on Twitter, TikTok, and all of this, where some of the facts have started to get blurry. And some people start making assumptions, but talking about it like it's fact, to draw people into their channel, to get their likes and their clicks and views and whatnot. Too much of that stuff's been going on, so the police deliberately clammed up. And some have praised and some have criticised them for it. I think it's better that they say out, or that they're a little bit more vague about some things, that they don't release too much, unless they've got a package of things that has an end-to-end connection of, this, we are going to tell you this about this person, and this is how it all connects together, and why that's relevant, and what it means and what it doesn't mean, rather than giving it out piecemeal and allowing us to make assumptions and allowing it to have 5 days worth of newspapers out of it, 60 hours worth of TV content out of it, and all of that. And it allows us to move the story on, which is exactly what happens with 24-hour news like the BBC, that it's not enough to broadcast what has happened. They then have to debate it, bring in experts about it, ask them, and are you willing to say that? And would you be willing to... I mean, we see these things. I've seen people post texts they've had from the BBC onto Twitter saying, do you know, I was asked to do this. Would you be willing to take this position on this thing and make this statement on it? And their justification for those sorts of messages were that, well, you know, in today's news, what we need to do is to not just talk about the story, but to move it on. Well, you move it on when more facts about it come out, and then you talk about those. You don't then go to speculate and say, well, do you think you did it because of this? Because then somebody's going to hear it, believe it, and think that because it's the BBC, you meant it. They're not necessarily going to hear that was speculation. So in some ways I'm saying it is good that the police aren't making it too cloudy, messy, and allowing too much room for speculation. As much as the media seem to hate it, the mainstream media in particular seem to hate it, that they're not willing to answer questions, they're not willing to give you room to trip them up on anything, and they may be omitting things on purpose. She absolutely knows more because she's been working with some of these other organisations and ones that specifically deal with terror, and find out his background, find out who he was in the country he came from, has he got any history of X, Y, and Z. There was stuff that I know that police chief omitted because it's not fleshed out. It's a fact about the person, but it could lead you down a road. And I think I'd rather have a nice, a fleshed out story that kind of makes sense within itself than having the news media batter us with, oh, well, this and this and that could be this, and then allowing social media to go completely bonkers about, I know him, he lives on my street, I know the two women, because they took two women in from the business that he works in. They were arrested. How do you know they were arrested? How do you know that they didn't voluntarily go in for questioning? And they're just as concerned as we are about how the person that they worked with has gone and done this thing. And they said, well, we had no idea. And now you're immediately making it look like they're part of it. They knew. You don't know. You don't know. So as soon as they went, oh, well, we've taken a couple of people into questioning. And when she did that press conference, she made no mention of those two people. None whatsoever. And it's the first thing the newsreader said, do you know what? They didn't mention those two women they took in. He said, well, where did you get that from? He said, oh, well, we actually got it from a source. That the business he worked at, someone spotted two women being taken away by the police in a police car. Oh, so you've made an assumption there was an arrest. They could have gone in voluntarily. Yeah. And actually, it hasn't been officially announced that could have been unrelated. I know it's highly unlikely it was unrelated, but the fact that they haven't made an official statement about those two women, you've created your own story about it, and now some people have taken what you've said and they will never change their mind on that, because once you've said it, they might only catch that episode and they might not watch you again until next week. And they've gone away thinking, did you hear about them two women that got arrested? No, they didn't get arrested. What do you mean? It's a perfect example of how this stuff can just wander and be added to and be reinterpreted, misinterpreted.
One I watched last night, which was interesting, on how we talk about choices of how people get to a certain position. I watched a documentary. I watched most of it on a policeman called Wayne Couzens, who was sentenced to life for the rape and murder of Sarah Everard. Yeah. Now, he was a serving policeman, and earlier on in his career, he was done for exposing himself. Yeah, which the police cautioned him, blah blah, and it was, as I understand, it was pushed under the carpet.
And he had nicknames, didn't he?
Yeah,
those sorts of nicknames, and people thought he was a bit rapey.
Yeah, he was like, even within the police force, he was named Rapey Couzens, and then during COVID, he was driving along, flashed his warrant card at Sarah Everard, took her somewhere, strangled her, raped her, and obviously killed her. And it's just how does he go? And what they were saying during the investigation, that they had something on exposure. Then the next thing they've got on him is murder. But they believed honestly that in between there are several steps to take you from exposure to murder. So he was building up his repertoire of choices during that time.
Yeah, I've seen a few documentaries and many TV shows like about behavioural analysis and how that's a whole thing in investigation units where you would build a profile of the person, and many of them talk about how it always starts with a thing that gives them the initial buzz, and eventually it escalates. And this is where serial killers will start out tentatively with this sort of thing, and then it will end up somewhere over here, and you can see how they're getting more confident. And these behavioural analysis people are saying, well, look, you can tell when the guys get more confident, because you might see these X, Y, and Z at the scene where he's more blatantly left this thing out. He hasn't bothered cleaning this thing up. He's been more thoughtful on, look, he's gone from using this implement to kill the person to this implement, and look, the way he's managed to do this to this person is a far more skillful way. Clearly he's read a medical textbook and he knows that he has to squeeze here and not there, and you can see how this thing escalates. So yes, there must have been a pattern of behaviour from him exposing himself indecently right the way up to killing someone. There must have been a pattern of stuff that happened in between where he pushed it a little bit further, kept getting away with it, kept getting a bigger buzz out of it. And like anything, even when you look at people that do all these base jumping and whatnot, you're going for a bigger and bigger adrenaline hit because you get used to it. Your tolerance level gets higher and higher, and you want that next fix, the bigger fix, and you start jumping off more and more dangerous things. That it's an analogy I'm using. I'm not trying to compare the two, but in an analogy, you're trying to get this bigger and bigger hit. So, who didn't spot that, or did someone?
No, apparently it was a massive failing in the police force that was basically just ignored. Even the phrases that you used there about how it was described within the police force, it was like the police were untouchables, and even to the point when she was killed. In her local town, there was a demonstration by the women during COVID. Now allegedly they shouldn't have been demonstrating because it was COVID, but the police went in with heavy-handed techniques and sort of roughed them up a bit, which was just horrific. You know, a woman had just been killed by a serving police officer, and they were the police were moving them on during a. It got
a little bit rowdy in places, and.
Yeah,
they had said that they were going to do it, and then they cancelled it, and then turned up anyway. And there was some not so nice confrontations between some of the people and the police. So there was a bit of to and fro in there, from what I saw on the news. That some of it was, it was seen as, oh well, it was a vigil, but that person was misbehaving a bit. And so some of it was left. I think too much of these things are left to interpretation of a video, like a video without sound and without any. You could interpret it any way you like if you just look at the video out of context. So I think the best thing you can do in times like those is be precise, and to actually not withhold anything, and to say this is exactly what this was the sequence of events. There was this person started shouting at that police officer got miffed and said, look, you need to step back, and 5 times told that person to step back. They didn't, so they were then arrested on the floor. At that point someone came in with a camera and saw a person on the floor being handcuffed, and that's the only bit we got to see. That could have happened. I'm not sure if it did, but my point being that all that news, even now, I feel like everything I know about that event is still too vague. I don't know exactly how it got from vigil to someone on the floor. I'm not entirely sure how that happened.
Fascinating. I went to bed at sort of at this point, but what they were just about to arrest him, the serving police officer. 30 minutes before they arrested him, he wiped his phone clean back to factory settings, which told them one thing.
He knew.
Somebody tipped him off that they were coming to arrest him. 30 minutes before he was arrested, he wiped his phone clean back to factories. Somebody tipped him off. So even though one of his colleagues knew he was going to be arrested for murder, they tipped him off and he wiped his phone clean.
Now that's different between being brought in because you've stolen a bunch of stuff, but actually taking a life. That whoever tipped him off needs to be sorted out. And to tip someone off is one thing, but to tip them off because they're being brought in for murder,
Yeah.
that's not a matey thing to do. That's despicable. To allow him room. And that means that the parents... I mean, what if he'd got off because there was valuable information missing based on... it's being able to see on his phone that there has been a sequence of escalating behaviours. Now, if he's tipped him off and allowed him to wipe that, and if he'd got away with it, then he's essentially denied the family a chance for any kind of... Because you can imagine it's bad enough that they've lost their daughter, but to never get closure, I would imagine, is probably one of the worst things that can happen subsequently. That it just feels open. I mean, I feel bad for some of these people that never get an answer, that the killer's never found, or the body's never found, that they never said where it was buried. You imagine not getting that closure, having the person caught, having the funeral, and being able to wrap it up and go, well, I've done the end-to-end thing, and now all I've got to deal with is me grief. But yeah, it extends the grief when you don't have those answers, and he potentially could have left things in that position where there isn't enough to bring him in on, if not for dash cams.
Sat in the mind of that. Yeah, I just sat in the mind of that person that tipped them off this morning, and I was just thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to consider tipping him off. Let's just say I've got 20 years service. I'm going to tip him off. What are the consequences of me tipping him off before I do it? Okay, exactly what you said. Or I get found out, I get thrown out of the police, I get done for perverting the course of justice, and I lose all my pension and all my salary. Now am I going to tip him off? No.
So what's
so
gone
I made
through
a
his
choice
head?
at that point.
Yeah. What's gone through his head? It is a choice. He made that choice.
Yeah.
Christ, how'd you get to that decision?
I know, and you just think, okay, just take a breath, take a few seconds. Right, if I do this, what happens? Blah blah blah, and you come to the correct conclusion. I do nothing. And actually, I should be going to my commanding officer and say, look, I know a little bit more, and I'm going to,
Well, you would normally
or you just don't say anything.
You would normally do that for a mate, wouldn't you? So it makes you think, does that mean that the person that tipped him off, does he agree with what he did?
Well, that's just...
Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, if to tip him off means that he's looking after him, so why is he looking after him?
Network.
Yeah, why is he looking after him? I mean, he probably thought, I'll tip him off, he's going to wipe his phone anyway, so my text will disappear. All right, so he said, well, it's not going to trace back to us, because it's only on my phone, I'll delete it off my phone. Although, I'm sure if they went off and pulled a bunch of phone records, they could probably see that. But if he did it via like WhatsApp, which does it using data rather than SMS, there's no trace back. Especially once he's wiped the phone. But what's going through a guy's head that he's going to try and save a guy from being charged for murder? He's saving a fellow. Why isn't he, as a fellow policeman, going, that guy needs to go down because he's making us look like a bunch of clowns? Well, worse than that, he's making us look like, like a police officer pulled his warrant card to get her in. So he used his force, his legal right to detain someone to commit that act. He used what goes through your head to say, I'm going to make sure I'm going to try and help him out. Why are you helping him out? If you knew he did it.
What was fascinating was they played it on the documentary, was after he murdered her, he then rang the vets and said, look, I'm having a bit of an issue with me dog. It keeps jumping up. I think it's a little bit hyperactive, and it keeps scratching the rest of the family. He had scratches on his head, and it was that astute that he rang his vets to get recorded saying that, knowing that was going to be part of his defence if it ever came to it.
That's his knowledge of how these things work, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they played the script of him being on the phone to the vets and saying this, And it was just, and when they brought him in for question, and he had these cuts on his head. So in our credit, this poor girl tried to defend herself, and unfortunately was unsuccessful. But horrific, you just get into that bit that we started off here about choices of giving information or not giving information, and just how that can shape our destiny.
Well, all of that happened because of omission, right? And accepting that, he's a bit of a character, right? We'll not say now about that. And look at what's happened. That there's been more than that, to the point where the Mets ended up in special measures. There's other forces been in special measures, and now we don't have confidence in the people that are meant to be looking after us.
There was another one this morning. I sort of recognise his face. I'm just looking it up. Ex-head of police watchdog charged with raping girl under 16 in indecent assault. So Michael Lockwood, another one.
That name rings a bell, yeah.
64 years old, charged with indecent assault on minors. It's just like, but we could have included all that in our power episode, couldn't we?
I was just about to say this is exploitation of power, using that power, and how that power becomes a circle. This circle of people saying, we're not going to say that, and we're going to take care of each other to allow us to get out in corruption. And we talked about how does power itself corrupt you? It should people that seek it. And there was a guy that rang Talk TV yesterday, and he spoke about the process of how they used to take on police officers, and it was, Christ, they used to interview your family, your friends. They used to ask you why you wanted to be a police officer. You would have to fill out a test. You had to have GCSEs. If you didn't, you had to pass a maths and English test set by the police. So they wanted to investigate your reasons for joining, your character, where you wanted to be, what did you want to do as a police officer, like what do you want to do once you're in. You then had to do a bleep test to do that, when the gap between the bleeps gets shorter and shorter. You had to be able to run so far, so your fitness level had to be X, your height had to be X, you had to be... And once you're in, you had to be, your level of dress always had to be of a certain kind. They even checked out your haircut. They looked at all of your tattoos, and are any of them going to be exposed once you're within uniform. They then looked at your tattoos and saw if any of them were gang related, and looked at the history of the tattoo. Why have you got that, and does it relate to any crime that we know about? Is it a common tattoo?
2-year probation.
Yeah. And he rattled off. I mean, I can't remember all of it. He rattled loads of it off. There were interviews. He says, because he was a recruiter. He didn't give his real name. He says, look, I was a recruiter for one of the northern areas. He says, and this is the process that I oversaw. And he rattled the entire thing off. He spoke for minutes, end to end, on everything he did. And Ian Collins was like, bloody hell. I can see how that was costly and time consuming, and perhaps why it's not like that anymore, because it costs a ton of money. But by the end of it, you were sure that person was going to do exactly what they said, and that we had the right people in. Because I mean, it is a position of power, right? And we should be doing the same sort of thing for politicians. That there should be a vetting process. That why are you wanting to be in here? Are you doing this for a career? I'm an advocate of saying that politicians should be given a maximum term. You're only allowed to be a politician for this long, and then you have to switch out for someone else, because it shouldn't be necessarily a career thing, or being motivated by making it into a career, so you can then exit and then sit on the board of 9 companies. So I'm going to do this for 10 years, and I'm going to exit on this 6-figure salary, 7-figure salary, and I'm going to sit on the boards with all my knowledge of how Parliament works, and I can teach them how to petition for certain things to get these done, and who to speak to, and who to send this to, and how to do and all of that backhander nonsense. And it shouldn't be in. And the police is the same. You shouldn't have people who go in, like we used to save the Freemasons. My brother Stu's a Freemason, and I've asked him a ton of questions about what it actually is. He said, well, it works a bit like a union, and yes, they do help each other out, but one thing that's never talked about is all the money they give to charity. Like, I pay me subs, and all of the work they do in the community is actually mandatory. So they build community centres for people, all paid for. they donate to these charities, they do this work and all that. There's tons of that stuff that we do. So it's not as nefarious as you think it is, but just because we have rituals and things that people don't get to know, and to be fair, if you Google it, most of it's out there in one form of it or another. Is that some of it's there is. He says some of it's still not. Some of it's either been changed deliberately or hasn't quite got out there, because you need to be at the very top to sort of know it. And these people are loyal and what have you. But it is about loyalty for them, loyalty to a cause, and loyalty towards helping people out. And you'd think that that's where policemen, the place that they come from would be, I want to do more. Because Kelsey's been applying for all sorts of stuff, and she thought about going into the volunteer police, because she wants to do it for the right reasons. She said, I want to do stuff. I want to do something that has an impact. So she's started this week with the TA, or the reserves, or the reserves as they're called now. She's right, because we're working on a little project, and I've been helping her with her new job title and this and that. And she says, "Oh look, I was going to give you a ring, but I'm just about to go on me 8 days basic training." I said, "Oh, again?" Because she's been in the army. Like she said when she was on as a guest, she was in the regulars. Yeah. She's just going back into her basic training for 8 days, and she's got another one coming up in September for a couple of weeks. I was like, "Oh, you'll be looking forward to that, are you?" And she said, "Well, look, her motivation for doing it is she wants to give something. She wants to feel like she's spending her time committing to a thing that helps something else happen, so she can feel like her time's been productive." I mean, she does her own thing. She does her netball, and she's trying to advance her career a bit, and she's trying to learn more and be better. But then she wants to, as we talk about a lot, pay it forward. So all the stuff that we've taught her, coached her on, she's paying it forward and coaching her own staff, but she then wants to take it into something bigger. So she went military, been there, done that, loved it, loved the travel, loved the exercises, they get involved in all sorts. It's not just military work. They also help out in other local things and get involved in stuff. She said, "Oh, I'm looking forward to doing something that leaves a mark." That's great, but to exploit your power like that, it's funny, how all the things that we've talked about across the last 22 episodes all seem to interconnect, from choice to power to lies and deception. Because this is what you were talking about before, was deceiving. There's a difference between sort of lies and deceiving someone, and lies of omission. It all ties together into character and motivation, and what you choose to do with all of those things, and what your influences are. And I think my final word on this Nottingham thing is, I think the police are doing the right thing, and they're very conscious that news spreads fast, because it's not just newspapers and the 10 o'clock news now. It's social media. There's news in between news. There's 24-hour news. There's people who aren't reporters, who have their own channels and become their own reporters and offer things out. And sometimes their motivations for doing so are more about views than perhaps the story itself, and making sure people know the right stuff that they feel okay to speculate. And I think it's great in some ways that they're treating this with so much sensitivity, that they're only giving out the stuff that they know, and the stuff that they know that they can control and they know is definite, and they have a complete picture of the thing. So I feel good about that with my OCD, that I'll know the story properly, that I'll know the right facts and exactly what happened, when it happened, why it happened. And to release his name, I don't know what. I'm not sure we ever should, especially with the terrorist. I'm not sure we ever should, because then that gives them publicity. We know who they were, and it might lead back to some cause and giving publicity to something that we shouldn't. I'm not sure it does any good, does it? Except his family, which might be nice people and not have any clue why he did what he did, they're going to figure out who they are, and that might be someone's neighbour. Here, your son's done this. It's despicable. And then, they could end up seeing some harm and having had nothing to do with it. So keep it that way. I think live omission, in some cases, especially in these sorts of cases, is a necessity, purely because of the way culture is and the tools that we have at our disposal these days. It's not the same as it was, and we need to acknowledge that, and maybe not be quite so hard on the police for trying to, these days, after all they've gone through, they're trying to do something right. So their motivation for keeping this information is a good motivation. They're not doing it because they don't want to tell you. They're doing it because they think, no, we need to be very, very careful about how we put this out. There's 2 young kids involved and a guy who was stabbed just because he wanted to steal his van. He stabbed, rather than hoying him out and saying, give us your van, he just stabbed him and took it. Right? A caretaker, a much loved person. So yeah. I think it's fine, but good. Yeah, it was a good one. It was a good one, and I like that we're trying to find a Gadgies way of looking at something that's currently going on. And I like your mum said, she doesn't always watch the telly, doesn't watch the news like that, and this becomes her source, and it helps her interpret the event. Yeah. And I hope we create a bit of understanding with it, and give people food for thought, and no room for assumption. Yeah. So, more photos coming up. If you wanna give us a hand with the channel, the best way you can do that is to click the like button, subscribe, follow, chuck some comments at us, good or bad. Let us know what you're thinking, and we can respond, and we can even adjust the content as well. If there's something you want us to talk about, or the way we talk about it, we're happy to hear it. But until next time, thanks for listening, and take care.